The folder rode shotgun the whole drive up from Annapolis. State-issued Manila, the kind that gets softer at the corners after a few hands touch it. I had it wedged between the passenger seat and the center console so it wouldn't slide when I took the curves on Route 2. January light came in flat through the windshield, that washed-out gray you get in Maryland when the sky can't decide if it wants to snow or just stay cold. I didn't open the folder again. I'd read it twice already that morning before I left my apartment. Not much in there. A complaint summary, 3 pages. A licensing memo. A printout of the group home's last inspection report from November. Annie Murray's sticky notes all over everything, her handwriting tight and slanted. Quick turnaround. Recommend closure or remediation by WED. Another one said, press interest possible. Keep it clean. That was Annie. She ran the contract pool for the Department of Human Services, and she didn't like surprises. A missing staff member was a surprise. A licensed group home near Druid Hill Park with bug complaints and fire alarms going off at 2 in the morning was the kind of surprise that could end up in the Baltimore Sun if someone decided to make noise about it. She'd called me Saturday evening. I was microwaving leftover rice and watching a basketball game I didn't care about. She said they needed an independent review before the case got reassigned to someone with a badge and a longer timeline. I told her I could start Monday. She said she'd send the file. That was it. I took the exit onto I-83 and followed the signs toward downtown. Traffic wasn't bad for a Monday morning. Most of the rush had cleared out by the time I hit the city limits. I passed the hospital complexes and the row houses with their painted screens, then turned west when my phone told me to. Druid Hill was up ahead somewhere. I'd been to this part of Baltimore maybe twice before. Once for a training seminar. Once because I got lost coming back from a site visit in Park Heights. I figured this job should be routine. Go in, look at the logbooks, interview the staff who were still there, write up whether the home could keep its beds or needed to shut down until they fixed whatever was broken. Then I'd go home and wait for Annie to send me the next folder. But the complaint summary bugged me. It wasn't just the bugs. The inspection report mentioned pest activity in the basement and 2 second-floor rooms. Ants, mostly. Maybe roaches. The director had signed off on an extermination schedule, and the inspector noted it as pending remediation. Fine. That happened. It was the other stuff. Fire alarms. 4 times in 3 weeks, all between midnight and 4 in the morning. The report said the smoke detectors were functioning normally and no source was found. Staff logged it as malfunction. But 4 times was a lot. And then there was the boy, Mario Maldonado, 11 years old. The complaint summary said he'd been placed there in October after his last foster home requested an emergency move. No details on why. His case file wasn't included in what Annie sent me. Just a note that said, nonverbal, high supervision needs. The complaint didn't name him directly, but it mentioned that a resident with complex needs had been seen in the basement unaccompanied. And that was a licensing violation if the kid was flagged for 1-to-1. I didn't know if Mario was flagged. Annie's notes didn't say. The thing that stuck with me was the word nonverbal. I'd worked with a lot of kids who didn't talk. Some of them were autistic. Some had processing delays. Some just decided words weren't worth it after everything that had happened to them. It didn't mean they couldn't communicate. It just meant you had to pay attention to what they did instead of what they said. I used to be better at that. I turned onto Auchentorley Terrace and slowed down, checking the house numbers. The group home was supposed to be in a converted duplex halfway down the block. I spotted it before I saw the address. Brick front, 3 stories, narrow porch with a metal railing. The paint on the window trim was peeling. There was a small sign by the door, white with blue lettering. West Side Youth Services, licensed residential facility. I pulled over and parked across the street, turned off the engine, sat there for a second. I didn't want to think about why I was doing this job instead of the one I used to have. But it came up anyway. It always did when I walked into a new placement. I'd been a school counselor for 6 years, middle school, then high school. I liked the work. I was good at the parts that mattered. Listening, noticing when a kid's story didn't line up, writing the reports that got them services they actually needed. I wasn't great at the politics. I didn't smile enough in meetings. I pushed back when administrators wanted to move on from a case before it was finished. And then a girl I'd been working with died. Her name was Simone, 8th grade. She'd told me about what was happening at home, and I'd filed it the right way, followed every step in the protocol. Child Protective Services opened an investigation. It took them 11 days to make contact. By then, she'd stopped coming to school. By the time anyone checked on her, it was too late. The review said I'd done everything correctly. The district kept me on. But I couldn't stay in that building. I couldn't walk past her locker. I couldn't sit in another IEP meeting and pretend I believed the system worked if you just documented everything right. So I quit. And I ended up here. Contracted reviews for the state. No students depending on me. No long-term cases, just folders and recommendations and drive time. I grabbed the folder and got out of the car. The air smelled like cold pavement in somebody's wood stove. I crossed the street and climbed the steps to the porch. There was a doorbell and an intercom box. I pressed the button and waited. A voice came through the speaker. Male, young, yeah. Stephen Kelly, I'm here for the state review. A pause, then a buzz, and the lock clicked open. The guy who met me in the entryway was maybe 5'9", slim, wearing scrubs under a zip hoodie, dark hair cut short on the sides. He had an ID badge clipped to his pocket. The name on it said Peyton Gonzalez, LPN. You're the investigator, he said. Not a question. Consultant, I said. I'm doing the licensing review. Right. Okay. He stepped back and gestured toward a side room off the hall. We can talk in here. The room was small. Probably used to be a dining room before the duplex got converted. Now it had a desk, a filing cabinet, a cork board covered in schedules and medication charts. There was a space heater running in the corner. It rattled a little. Peyton sat down behind the desk. I stayed standing for a second, then pulled over a folding chair and sat across from him. You're the nurse on site? I asked. Yeah, days, mostly. Sometimes I cover evenings if we're short. I opened the folder and pulled out a pen. How many staff are here right now? Today? Me and one direct care aide. We've got another aide coming in at 3. The director's supposed to check in this afternoon, but I don't know if she will. And how many residents? 3. We've got 6 beds, but we're down to 3 right now. I wrote that down. Who's the missing staff member? His expression tightened a little. Kayla Lewis, case aide. She signed out Friday night and didn't come back. What time Friday? 11:45, end of second shift. Did she say where she was going? No. She just logged out in the book and left. I wasn't here. I saw it when I came in Saturday morning. Did she take anything with her? Peyton hesitated. Her coat, her bag. I don't know what else. Did anyone try to call her? Yeah. The weekend supervisor tried Saturday. It went to voicemail. She tried again Sunday. Same thing. And police? They took a report Sunday night. Missing adult. But they said since she signed out on her own and there's no sign of foul play, it's probably just someone who decided not to come back to work. I nodded. That sounded about right for how these things went. Adults disappeared all the time. Most of them turned up. Some didn't want to be found. Was she having problems here? I asked. Peyton looked at the desk. I don't know. She seemed fine. She was good with the kids. Any issues with the director? Other staff? Not that I saw. I made a note. The complaint summary mentions a resident was in the basement with her before she left. That right? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. Yeah, Mario. She took him down to do laundry. Why? He wanted to, I guess. She wrote it in the log. Resident requested task. Accompanied to basement laundry, 1930 to 2015. And she came back alone? Yeah. Did you ask Mario about it? Peyton's jaw tightened. Mario doesn't talk. At all? No. He writes sometimes, draws, but he doesn't say anything out loud. I wrote that down, underlined it. What time did Kayla leave after that? Like I said, 11:45, she finished her shift. And Mario, he was in his room, lights out at 10. He was there at bed check. I flipped back through the complaint summary, found the section about the basement. This says he was observed down there unaccompanied on another occasion. When was that? I don't know exactly. Maybe a week before. The overnight aide saw him on the stairs. She brought him back up. Is he supposed to be supervised one-to-one? Peyton looked uncomfortable. He's high supervision. We're supposed to know where he is, but we don't have the staffing for one-to-one unless he's in crisis. I nodded. I'd heard that before. Lots of places had policies they couldn't actually staff. Can I see the logbook? I asked. Peyton pulled a 3-ring binder from the desk drawer and handed it over. I flipped to the last week of entries. Kayla's handwriting was round and neat. She'd logged the laundry trip exactly like Peyton said. 1930 to 2015. Resident cooperative. Task completed. Return to unit. Nothing about why Mario wanted to do laundry. Nothing about what happened down there. I looked up. Can I talk to Mario? Peyton shifted in his chair. You can try. He probably won't respond. That's fine. He stood up. I'll take you to his room. We went up the stairs to the second floor. The walls were beige. There were scuff marks along the baseboards and a water stain on the ceiling near the landing. It smelled like cleaning spray and something else underneath. Something stale. Peyton stopped at the third door on the left. It was open halfway. He's in there, he said. I'll wait out here. I stepped past him and looked inside. The room was small. Twin bed, dresser, a wooden chair by the window. The blinds were half closed. There was a bookshelf with maybe 6 or 7 books on it, all of them thin. Kids' chapter books, a notebook on the desk, a pencil cup, and the wall. Above the bed, someone had taped moth wings in neat rows, maybe 20 of them, all different sizes. Brown ones, gray ones, a few that still had dusty yellow patterns on them. They were arranged carefully, evenly spaced, like specimens in a collection. I stood there looking at them. The boy wasn't in the room. I glanced back at Peyton. Where is he? Probably the common room, downstairs. I pulled out my notebook and wrote it down. Moth wings, arranged, collecting. Then I stepped back into the hall and closed the door most of the way. Okay, I said. Let's go find him. I figured the residence would be easier than trying to get more out of Peyton right away. He'd given me what he had. The rest was going to be timeline work and direct questions to people who were actually there Friday night. I needed something solid. Logs could get altered, staff could misremember or cover, but kids usually just told you what they saw, especially if you didn't make it complicated. Peyton said Florence Garrett and Albert Lee were both around Friday evening and probably still up when Kayla left. He offered to bring them in one at a time. I said that'd work. Florence came first. She was maybe 16, slender, long black hair tied back in a ponytail. She wore a thrifted denim jacket over leggings and kept her hands folded in her lap when she sat down across from me. Peyton stayed in the doorway for a second, then left when I nodded. You're not in trouble, I said. I'm just trying to figure out what happened Friday night. You knew Kayla, right? Florence nodded. Yeah, she was nice. Did you see her that night? A little. She was on second shift. I saw her in the common room around dinner. Did she seem normal? Stressed? Upset? Florence thought about it. Normal, I think. She talked to Mario for a while. I wrote that down. What were they talking about? I don't know, she just sat with him. She did that sometimes. She spent extra time with him. Yeah. Florence shifted in her chair. I mean, she was nice to everyone, but she paid extra attention to Mario. He doesn't talk, so I think she liked that he just listened. That lined up with what Peyton said about Kayla taking Mario to the basement. What do you mean? She paid extra attention? Florence shrugged. Like she'd sit with him during quiet time and tell him stories, or she'd bring him a snack if he looked upset. Little stuff. She said he needed someone patient because he'd been bounced around a lot. Did anyone else notice? Probably. I don't think it was a secret or anything. She just, I don't know. She liked helping him, I guess. I kept my tone even. Do you know what kinds of stories she told him? Florence shook her head. I wasn't really listening. Just regular stuff, I think. Like about her day or something. Okay. And Friday night, did you see her leave? No. I went to bed around 10. She was still here. Did you hear anything after that? Alarms, people moving around, anything weird? Florence hesitated. Not that night. But the alarms have been going off a lot lately. Like 2 or 3 times in the past few weeks. Middle of the night, and then there's nothing wrong. I made another note. Thanks, Florence. If you remember anything else, let Peyton know and he can call me. She nodded and left. Albert came in next. He was older, maybe 17, wiry build, close-cropped black hair. He wore a graphic hoodie with some band logo I didn't recognize and kept his arms crossed the whole time. You're the state guy, he said. Not a question. Yeah, Stephen Kelly. I'm trying to figure out what happened to Kayla. Albert snorted. Good luck. Nobody tells us anything. I'm asking you now. He looked at me for a second, then sat down. What do you want to know? Did you see Kayla Friday night? Yeah, she was here. Did she seem normal? I guess. I didn't really talk to her. Did you see Mario that night? Albert's expression shifted. Not much, but enough that I noticed. Yeah. What was he doing? Same thing he always does. Sitting in the corner with his notebook. Peyton said Kayla took him to the basement to do laundry. I didn't see that part, but yeah, she took him places sometimes. She was always trying to get him to do normal kid stuff. Did it work? Albert shrugged. I don't know, he's weird. He paces the halls at night. I paused. What do you mean? Like, after lights out, I hear him sometimes, walking back and forth in the hallway. Peyton knows about it. They just let him because he doesn't bother anyone. How often? I don't know. A couple times a week, maybe. And you're sure it's Mario? Yeah, I looked once. It was him. I wrote that down. Anything else unusual about him? Albert thought about it. There's this gray dust along the windowsills in the hall. I asked Peyton about it once, and he said maybe it was from the exterminator or something, but it keeps coming back. I see it near Mario's room mostly. Gray dust. I didn't know what to do with that yet, but I wrote it down anyway. Okay. Thanks, Albert. He got up and left without saying anything else. I found Peyton in the hallway outside, checking something on a clipboard. He looked up when I stepped out. Get what you needed? He asked. Maybe. Florence said Kayla spent extra time with Mario, told him stories, brought him snacks. You notice that? Peyton nodded. Yeah, I mean, Kayla was like that with all the kids, but Mario was her project, I think. She said he needed consistency. And the nighttime pacing Albert mentioned? Oh, yeah. Peyton shifted his weight. Mario doesn't sleep well. We let him walk the halls as long as he stays on the second floor and doesn't wake anyone up. It's in his care plan. And the gray dust? Peyton frowned. That's been weird. We keep seeing it, but I don't know where it's coming from. The exterminator didn't find anything that would leave residue like that. What does it look like? Just dust. fine grayish. It shows up on the windowsills, sometimes on the floor near Mario's door. I wipe it down and it comes back. Could it be from outside? Maybe, but the windows are sealed. I made another note. What about the moths Florence mentioned? Oh, yeah. Peyton looked uncomfortable. Staff keep seeing small moths, like little gray ones. But the exterminator traps come up empty, so it's hard to document the normal way. They're just around sometimes. Then they're not. How long has that been happening? Since Mario got here, I think. October. I didn't say anything for a second, just wrote it down. Is that a problem? Peyton asked. I don't know yet. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw Annie Murray's name on the screen. I need to take this, I said. Peyton nodded and stepped away. I answered. Kelly. Steven, quick check-in. How's it going? Annie's voice was brisk, no preamble. Still gathering information. I've talked to the nurse and a couple of residents. I'll need to review logs and... Right. Listen, I need you to keep this simple. The department's getting heat from the licensing board, and we don't need this dragging out. I stopped walking. What do you mean, keep it simple? Frame it as ordinary staff negligence. Kayla Lewis didn't follow protocol, supervision lapsed. She bailed when she realized she'd screwed up. Clean, straightforward. We close the file by Wednesday and move on. Annie, I don't have enough to... You have plenty. She took a high-needs kid to the basement, unsupervised. That's the violation right there. Everything else is noise. I felt something tighten in my chest. I need her phone records, and I need full shift logs for the past month before I can recommend anything. Silence on the other end. Then Annie's voice came back cooler. Steven, you're not law enforcement. You're not running a criminal investigation. You're doing a licensing review. That means you document what's already obvious, and you give me something I can take to the board. I'm telling you it's not obvious yet. Then make it obvious. That's not how this works. Another pause, longer this time. Fine, Annie said. Do what you need to do. But I'm not pulling strings for phone records or subpoenaing logs. You've got what's in front of you. Use it. Annie, I'll check in tomorrow. The line went dead. I stood there in the hallway for a second, staring at my phone. That was it. I'd pushed back, and now I was the problem. Annie wasn't going to help me get records. She wasn't going to run interference with the police or the director or anyone else. She wanted this closed, and if I didn't close it the way she wanted, she'd just pull me off and hand it to someone who would. I pocketed my phone. Cooperation just got harder. Whatever this was, Kayla's disappearance, the basement, the moths, the gray dust, I was going to have to dig without support. That's me, I guess. I went back to find Peyton. Peyton brought Mario to the side room around 2 that afternoon. Thelma Cochran came with him. She introduced herself as the contract therapist assigned after Mario's placement. She was probably mid-40s, 5'7" or so, light brown hair in a neat bun, hazel eyes behind thin frames. She wore a cardigan over a blouse and carried a clipboard bag. She shook my hand and sat down in the folding chair next to Mario without asking if she should stay. I figured she probably had to. Mario was her client. Mario was small, 4'8" maybe, slight build, sandy blonde hair, shaggy over his forehead, pale blue eyes, narrow chin. He wore an oversized hoodie with a faded logo I didn't recognize and kept a spiral notebook pressed against his chest with both hands. He didn't look at me when he came in. He sat down in the chair Peyton pulled over and stared at the floor. Peyton left and closed the door behind him. I introduced myself, told Mario my name was Steven Kelly, and I was here to ask a few questions about what happened last week. Mario didn't respond, didn't look up. Thelma leaned forward slightly and said in a calm, measured voice that Mario understood me but preferred to communicate through writing or drawing. She asked Mario if he was comfortable answering questions today. Mario nodded once. Small movement, barely there. I asked if he remembered Kayla Lewis. Mario nodded again. His fingers tightened on the notebook. I asked if he could tell me about the last time he saw her. Mario opened the notebook. He flipped past a few pages covered in pencil drawings, mostly geometric patterns, some kind of repeating shapes I couldn't quite make out. He found a blank page and pulled a pencil from his hoodie pocket. He wrote slowly, pressing hard enough that I could hear the graphite scratch against the paper. He turned the notebook around so I could read it. She helped me. I asked what kind of help. Mario pulled the notebook back and wrote again. This time it took longer. He paused halfway through, staring at the page, then kept going. Washing. She said washing helps. I asked what they were washing. Mario didn't write anything for a while. He looked at Thelma. She gave him a small nod, the kind of encouragement therapists give when they want you to keep going but won't push. Mario wrote one more word. Me. That didn't make sense. I asked if Kayla helped him do laundry. Mario shook his head. He underlined the word me twice, hard enough the pencil tore the page a little. Thelma spoke up then. She said Mario sometimes engaged in symbolic thinking, and that washing could represent emotional cleansing or a coping mechanism he associated with safety. She said it gently, like she was translating. Mario didn't react. He just kept staring at the notebook. I asked where Kayla went after she helped him. Mario started writing again. His hand moved faster this time, almost frantic. He filled 3 lines before he stopped and turned the notebook around. She went to the light. She said it was okay. She said I could stay. I read it twice. I asked what light he meant. Mario pulled the notebook back and stared at the page for a long time. Then he flipped to a new sheet and started drawing instead of writing. He drew a rectangle, tall and narrow. A doorway, I figured. Above the doorway, he drew a circle. Then he started filling the circle with tiny marks. It took me a second to realize what they were. Wings. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. He kept adding more, pressing the pencil so hard the page dimpled. The circle turned dark gray from all the graphite. He didn't stop until the whole thing was filled. He turned the notebook around again and set it on the desk between us. I looked at the drawing. I don't know why it hit me the way it did. It was just a doorway and a circle full of wings, but something about the way he'd drawn it, the care he took with each tiny wing, the way they overlapped and crowded together, made my chest tighten. I'd seen kids draw trauma before. This felt different, more specific, more deliberate. I asked if Kayla went through that door. Mario nodded. I asked if he went with her. Mario shook his head. I asked if he saw what was on the other side. Mario didn't move, didn't nod or shake his head. He just stared at the drawing. Then he reached out and closed the notebook. Thelma cleared her throat. She said she thought that was probably enough for today. She said Mario had been very cooperative and she didn't want to push him past his comfort level. I wanted to keep going. I had about 15 more questions, but Mario had already pulled the notebook back against his chest and gone still again. I figured pressing him wouldn't get me anything useful. I thanked Mario for talking to me. He didn't respond. Thelma stood and guided him toward the door. Before they left, I asked Thelma if we could talk for a minute. She told Mario to wait in the hall with Peyton. Mario left without looking back. Thelma sat down again. I asked her how long she'd been working with Mario. She said since late October, about a month. Twice a week, sometimes more if the home requested it. I asked if the mutism and the drawings were normal for him. She said yes. She explained Mario had experienced significant trauma in his previous placements, and that selective mutism was a common stress response in children with complex needs. The drawings helped him process emotions he couldn't verbalize. She said all of that in the same calm, therapeutic tone. I asked if she thought the drawings meant anything specific. She hesitated. Then she said imagery involving light and doorways could represent transition, loss, or separation anxiety. She said it wasn't unusual for a child like Mario to fixate on a staff member who showed him consistent attention. and Kayla's sudden disappearance could have triggered a grief response that manifested in symbolic drawings. I asked if she believed that. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said she believed Mario was processing something difficult, but she also had to admit the timing was concerning. Kayla disappeared Friday night. Mario drew that picture Saturday morning during free time. Thelma had seen it in his notebook during their Sunday session. She'd asked him about it then, and he wouldn't explain. He just kept drawing more wings in the margins. I asked if she'd reported that to anyone. She said she'd mentioned it to Peyton in passing, but didn't file anything formal because she didn't have evidence of a direct connection. Just a drawing. Kids drew strange things all the time. I thanked her. She left. I sat there staring at my notes for a while. Then I called it a day. I stayed at a motel on Reisterstown Road that night. It was the kind of place that rents by the week and doesn't ask questions. $49 a night. Parking lot half full. Vending machine by the office that only took ones. My room was on the second floor. Brown carpet, floral bedspread, pressboard furniture bolted to the wall. It smelled like old cigarettes and industrial cleaner. I didn't care. I just needed a bed. I tried to sleep around 11. Didn't work. I kept waking up every hour or so with the certainty that something was crawling on my skin. I'd jolt awake, brush at my arms, check the sheets. Nothing there. Just the dark and the hum of the heating unit under the window. I'd lie back down and close my eyes, and 20 minutes later it would happen again. That same feeling. Something light and quick moving across my neck or along my ribs. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up. I turned on the bedside lamp and checked myself over. No bites, no marks, nothing. I figured it was just nerves. I'd had nights like this before, back when I was still working at the school. Nights where my brain wouldn't shut off and my body decided to invent problems to keep me awake. I got up to use the bathroom. I flipped on the light and caught my reflection in the mirror over the sink. I looked tired. More than tired. I looked like I hadn't slept in days. That's when I saw it. There was something on my shirt cuff, pale, small. I lifted my arm and looked closer. It was a larva, maybe half an inch long, cream-colored with a darker line down the center. It wasn't moving, just sitting there on the fabric. I brushed it off onto the counter. It landed on its side and stayed still. I stared at it for a few seconds. Then I pressed my thumb down on it. It didn't squish. It broke. Dry. It crumbled into gray grit under my thumb, the same kind of texture as the dust Albert had described on the windowsills. I pulled my hand back and looked at the residue. Fine gray powder. No moisture, no membrane, just grit. I looked at my shirt. It was the button-down I'd packed yesterday morning. The blue one I kept in my closet at home. I hadn't worn it to the group home. I'd worn my gray jacket and a black shirt. This one had been folded in my overnight bag the whole time. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the grit on the counter. Then I grabbed a tissue from the box by the toilet and carefully wiped the powder into it. I folded the tissue over twice and set it on the edge of the sink. I washed my hands, checked my shirt again, checked my bag. Nothing else, just the one. I didn't know what it proved. Probably nothing. Could have picked it up anywhere. The motel, my car, some random place I brushed against during the day. But I bagged it anyway. Put the tissue in a plastic bag from the ice bucket liner and sealed it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. I just knew I wasn't going to ignore it. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I got back to the group home around 9 the next morning. Peyton was at the desk doing med counts or something, and Florence was in the common room with a book. I needed to check a few more things in the logs, but she waved me over. "Hey," she said. "I remembered something." I sat on the arm of the couch. "Yeah?" Kayla used to tell Mario stories, like specific ones, not just about her day or whatever. She'd tell him the same story over and over. Florence pulled her hair out of the ponytail and redid it, which seemed like a nervous habit. I heard her tell it maybe 3 times, always the same. What was the story about? A bee, or something that looked like a bee but wasn't really a bee. It collected things from people, memories, maybe, or feelings. I don't know. Kayla said it was from a book. Florence shrugged. Mario really liked it. He'd sit there and just stare at her the whole time. I wrote that down. You know what book? No, but she brought it in once. I saw it on the table by the med station. It had a weird cover, like a kid's book, but not really. Okay. Thanks. Florence nodded and went back to reading. I figured it was probably nothing, just something Kayla used to keep Mario calm. But it bugged me a little. The drawing Mario made had all those wings. And now, Florence was talking about a bee story. I told Peyton I'd be back in a couple hours and drove downtown. The Enoch Pratt Free Library was on Cathedral Street. Big stone building, old but clean, with those tall arched windows that make you feel like you're supposed to whisper. I parked 2 blocks over because street parking was a nightmare and walked back. Inside it smelled like old paper and floor wax. The circulation desk was near the front, staffed by a woman around 40 with black curly hair and a puff and a lanyard that said her name was Mackenzie Calderon. She smiled when I walked up. Can I help you? Yeah. I'm doing some background work for the state. I showed her my ID, the laminated one with the Department of Human Services seal that makes people think I have more authority than I actually do. I'm reviewing a group home over near Druid Hill. Just trying to track down some materials they might have checked out recently. Returns, mostly. Mackenzie nodded slowly. Okay. You have the address? I gave it to her. She typed it into the system, scrolling through something I couldn't see from my side of the desk. We have an institutional account linked to that address. Looks like they return books pretty regularly, mostly kids' chapter books, some young adult stuff. She kept scrolling. Last return was 6 days ago. 1 item. Can I see it? Should still be on the cart if it hasn't been reshelved yet. She stood and walked over to a metal cart near the back wall, scanning spines. I waited. She pulled a thin book from the middle shelf and brought it back. It was in one of those clear plastic protective sleeves libraries use for books that might get damaged easily. She set it on the desk between us. The paper lantern and the hollow bee. No author name on the cover, just the title in pale gold lettering above an illustration of a bee. The bee was painted in watercolor, soft gray and yellow with too many legs. And the face. The face was human. Small and round, like a child's face, but the expression was wrong. Not smiling, not frowning, just blank. I stared at it for a second longer than I meant to. Can I look through it? Sure. I opened the sleeve and flipped through the pages. The story was simple. A paper lantern hung in a garden and a hollow bee came every night to visit it. The bee collected light from the lantern piece by piece until the lantern went dark. Then the bee flew away. That was it. Maybe 20 pages total, but the illustrations were the thing that got me. The bee's face changed on every page. Subtle. Same round face, same features, but the expression shifted. Curious on page 3, hungry on page 7, tired on page 12, sad on the last page, or maybe not sad, empty. I flipped back to the beginning and checked again. Yeah, definitely different. This is weird, I said. Mackenzie leaned over to look. Yeah, we don't get a lot of requests for that one. It's been in the collection for years, but doesn't circulate much. Too strange for most kids, I think. I turned to the inside cover and checked the stamp history. The book had been checked out 4 times in the past 3 years. The most recent stamp was from 8 days ago, with the return dated 6 days ago, right before Kayla disappeared. Can I check this out? Sure, you have a card? Yeah. I handed it over. Mackenzie scanned my card, scanned the book, handed both back. Due in 3 weeks. Thanks. I carried the book out to the car and sat in the driver's seat for a while, just holding it. The bee's face on the cover stared up at me. I couldn't tell if it was looking at me or past me. I put it in the folder with the rest of my notes and drove back to the group home. When I got there, a patrol car was parked out front, not blocking the driveway, just sitting at the curb. I pulled in behind it and got out. A uniformed officer was standing on the porch talking to Peyton. The officer turned when I came up the steps. He was maybe 6 feet, solid build, short black hair, brown eyes, square jaw with stubble. His badge said Curtis. "You Kelly?" he asked. "Yeah. Declan Curtis. I'm following up on Kayla Lewis's missing person report." He glanced at Peyton, then back at me. "Peyton says you're doing a state review." "That's right." Curtis pulled a notepad from his jacket pocket. "Got a witness who says they saw Kayla's car Friday night. Chevy Malibu, blue, Maryland plates. Parked near Herring Run Park around 11:30. Witness was walking their dog. Said the car was empty, but the engine was still warm." I wrote that down. "Which part of the park?" "East side, near the creek access off Parkside Drive. Witness didn't think much of it at the time, but when they saw the missing person bulletin Sunday, they called it in." "Anyone check it out?" "I drove by yesterday. No car there now. No obvious signs of anything. But if she was there Friday night, it's worth a look." Curtis put the notepad away. "You planning to keep working this?" "Yeah." "All right. Let me know if you find anything. I'll do the same." He left. Peyton watched him go, then looked at me. "You think she's still alive?" I didn't answer. I just told him I'd be back tomorrow and got in my car. Herring Run Park was 20 minutes east. I took Sinclair Lane to Parkside and parked near the trail access Curtis mentioned. It was cold enough that my breath fogged when I got out. The park was mostly empty. A few runners on the main path, nobody near the creek. I walked down the access trail, hands in my coat pockets, looking for anything that stood out. The ground was frozen solid, bits of ice in the tire ruts where maintenance vehicles probably drove through. The creek ran parallel to the path about 30 feet to the left, half frozen, the sound of water underneath the ice faint and brittle. I kept walking. The path curved and the trees got thicker. I almost missed it. There was a scorched patch maybe 10 feet off the trail down near the creek. Circular, about 2 feet across, black against the pale frozen dirt. I walked over and crouched down next to it. The smell hit me right away. Lighter fluid, strong enough that it couldn't have been more than a day or two old. I looked closer. The scorch marks were concentrated in the center, like something small had been burned there. Not a pile of leaves or trash. Something compact. I couldn't tell what. The edges of the burn were clean, deliberate. Whoever did this used accelerant and made sure it burned completely. I stood up and looked around. No footprints, no other marks, just the scorched patch and the smell. I pulled out my phone and took 3 photos from different angles. Then I stood there for a minute trying to make it make sense. Kayla's car was here Friday night. Someone burned something small near the creek. Maybe the same night, maybe not. Could have been unrelated. Kids messing around, someone disposing of something they didn't want found. Could have been Kayla herself, panicking, trying to erase evidence of whatever mistake she made with Mario. But that didn't fit. If Kayla screwed up and took Mario somewhere he wasn't supposed to be, why drive out to Herring Run Park in the middle of the night? Why burn something by the creek? And the book. The story about the hollow bee. Mario's drawing with all the wings. The gray dust Peyton kept wiping away. The alarms going off at 2 a.m. with no source. None of it fit together. Not in a way that made sense. I walked back to my car, got in, and sat there with the heater running. I thought about calling Curtis and telling him about the scorched patch. I thought about calling Annie and explaining why I couldn't close this by Wednesday. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there staring at the trailhead, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. I pulled into the lot around 3 that afternoon. The burned patch at Herring Run was still stuck in my head. The clean edges, the smell of lighter fluid, the way it looked deliberate. I had my folder with the book inside, the one with the hollow bee and the kid's face that didn't look quite right. Peyton met me at the door before I even made it up the steps. "Mario's gone," he said. No preamble, just that. I stopped on the second step. "Gone when?" "Head count at 2:30. He was there at lunch. I checked his room after and he wasn't there. Checked everywhere upstairs." Peyton's voice was moving faster than usual, words clipping together. "Florence said she saw him in the common room around 1, but that's the last anyone saw him." I came up the rest of the steps. "Alarms?" "Nothing. Door logs are clean. No exit recorded since this morning when the aide went to get groceries." That stopped me. The doors had magnetic contacts. If Mario left through the front or the back, the system should have logged it. Should have beeped. Should have done something. "Show me the logs," I said. Peyton pulled out his phone, swiped to a monitoring app. I looked at the screen. Last entry was 9:42 that morning. Front door. Logged out, logged back in 11:15. Nothing after. I handed the phone back. "He's 11 years old. He didn't bypass the system." "I know." "So he's still inside." That's what I thought, but I checked every room twice. Bathrooms, closets, under beds. He's not upstairs. Florence appeared in the hallway behind Peyton. She had her arms wrapped around herself, denim jacket pulled tight. "I need to tell you something," she said. Peyton stepped aside. Florence came to the doorway but didn't come out onto the porch. She looked at me, then at the floor. "I gave him the book," she said. I waited. "The one Kayla used to read to him. I saw it on your desk this morning when I walked past. You left it there when you went out. I thought..." She stopped. Started again. "He's been really off since Kayla left. Pacing more. Not eating. I thought maybe if he had the book it'd help. Settle him down or something." I didn't say anything right away. I'd left the book on the desk in the side room. Stupid. I should have kept it in the folder. Kept the folder in my car. But I'd been looking at it again before I left, trying to figure out why someone would check it out, read it to a kid over and over, then return it the day before disappearing. "When?" I asked. "Around noon, right after lunch. He was in the common room and I brought it to him. He just stared at it for a while. Then he opened it. I left him alone after that." "Did he take it with him?" "I don't know. I didn't see it when Peyton said he was missing. It's not in the common room now." I rubbed my face. Probably looked like I was frustrated with her. Maybe I was, a little, but mostly I was frustrated with myself. Thelma Cochran came down the stairs behind Florence. She had her cardigan on, bag over one shoulder, and she looked calm. Too calm. "I'm sure he hasn't gone far," Thelma said. "Children like Mario don't just vanish. He's probably found a corner somewhere quiet, a place he feels safe." I looked at her. She had that therapist tone going. Measured, soothing, like she was talking to a scared parent in a conference room. It was hollow, not fake exactly, just routine. She'd said some version of this before, probably dozens of times, and it had been true often enough that she believed it. I didn't. "We're going to search the whole building," I said. "Every room, every closet, basement to attic." Peyton nodded. Thelma opened her mouth like she wanted to say something else, then closed it. "Florence, you take the second floor with Peyton," I said. "Check the residence rooms again, linen closets, storage. Thelma, first floor. I'll do the basement." Thelma frowned. "Shouldn't we search in pairs?" "We will be. You're staying on the first floor with the other residents. Keep them calm. I just need to clear the basement." She didn't argue after that. We split up. I took the stairs down. The basement was the same as when I'd been here yesterday. Bare bulbs, concrete floor, smell of detergent and mildew. Washing machines along one wall, dryer next to them, utility sink in the corner. Shelves with cleaning supplies and bulk toilet paper. furnace humming behind a metal cage in the back. I checked behind the shelves first. Nothing. Checked the furnace room. Just the furnace and a water heater and about 100 dust bunnies. I came back to the laundry area. That's when I saw it. The floor drain in the center of the room, the one I'd barely noticed yesterday, had fresh caulk around the edges. Glossy, uneven. Someone had sealed it recently enough that the caulk hadn't fully cured yet. I could see the texture, the way it beaded in some spots and smeared in others. I crouched next to it. Up close, it was worse. The caulk was thick, applied in a hurry. Definitely not professional work. It covered the seam where the drain cover met the floor all the way around. I stood and went back upstairs. Found Peyton in the hallway outside the residence rooms. "Did maintenance seal the basement drain?" I asked. He looked confused. "What?" "The floor drain in the laundry room. There's fresh caulk around it." "Was there a work order?" "No, I would have logged it." He pulled out his phone again, checked something. "Nothing filed. Why would we seal a drain?" "I don't know." Thelma came out of the common room. "Maybe it was leaking," she said, "or smelling. Old drains do that." "Peyton would know if there was a leak," I said. "Not if it happened over the weekend," Thelma said. "Maybe the weekend supervisor handled it." Peyton shook his head. "I talked to him Sunday night when I came in. He didn't mention anything about the drain, and he would have told me. That's protocol." I went back downstairs. Peyton followed me this time. I knelt next to the drain again, pulled my keys out of my pocket, picked the flathead car key and wedged it under the edge of the caulk. It peeled away easier than I expected. Soft, barely set. I worked my way around the edge, prying it loose. When I had enough cleared, I hooked my fingers under the drain cover and pulled. It came up. Warm air hit me first, not hot, just warm. Warmer than it should have been. Then the smell. Kerosene. Strong. The same smell I'd caught at Herring Run, but thicker here. Concentrated. And under it, something sweet. Burned sugar, maybe, or burned paper. I couldn't place it exactly, but it made my throat tighten. I leaned over the opening, pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, shone it down. The beam didn't reach far, just showed the top of a pipe, maybe 6 inches across, that dropped straight down into darkness. No bottom visible. I heard something. Faint. Fluttering. Like paper shifting in a draft. I held still and listened. It came again, soft, rhythmic. Wings, maybe, or pages turning. Peyton was standing behind me. "What is that?" he asked. "I don't know." I stood up fast, almost stumbled. "We're going upstairs now." "What?" "Now, Peyton." I didn't wait for him to argue. I went up the stairs 2 at a time, Peyton right behind me. Found Thelma in the side room with Florence and Albert. "Everyone stays on the first floor," I said. "Nobody goes to the basement, understood?" Thelma started to ask why, but I was already pulling out my phone. I dialed 911. The dispatcher picked up on the second ring. I gave her the address, told her we had a missing child, 11 years old, nonverbal, last seen 2 hours ago. Told her there was a potential hazard in the basement. Unsealed drain, chemical smell, possible confined space danger. She said she was sending police and fire rescue. ETA 12 minutes. I hung up and stood in the hallway. My phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at the screen for a second, then answered. "Hello?" No voice. Just tapping. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Tap, tap. Pause. Tap. I knew that pattern. I'd seen it before. "Mario," I said. Tap, tap. "Yes." My chest went tight. "Are you safe?" Tap, tap. "Are you hurt?" Tap, pause, tap. "No," I swallowed. "Is Kayla Lewis alive?" Long pause. Tap. "No." Another pause. Tap, 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 tap. I didn't know what that meant. The rhythm was different, faster, almost frantic. Then the call dropped. I stood there holding the phone, staring at the screen. My right palm itched. I looked down. There was a welt, raised, red, about the size of a dime. Right in the center of my palm where Mario had brushed against me earlier when Thelma brought him into the side room for the interview. I hadn't noticed it then, hadn't felt it, but it was there now. It looked like a sting. The sirens came in layers. Police first, then fire, then another engine I couldn't identify from the sound alone. I stood on the porch with Peyton behind me and watched 3 vehicles pull up in sequence like they'd rehearsed it. Declan Curtis stepped out of the first patrol car, same squared jaw and winter jacket from yesterday. Behind him came a fire truck and a rescue unit that looked more like an ambulance than anything else. A man in turnout gear climbed down from the truck and walked straight toward me without waiting for introduction. 6 feet, broad shoulders, graying hair cut military short, Lieutenant Bars on his collar. He introduced himself as Jeremy O'Donnell and asked who called it in. I raised my hand and said, "Stephen Kelly, state contractor." He asked where the child was last seen. I told him upstairs common room around 1 p.m. and that we'd searched the building twice with no exits logged since mid-morning. Jeremy asked about the hazard I'd mentioned on the call. I said basement drain, unsealed, chemical smell, and I wasn't sure what was down there, but it was warm and something was moving. Declan came up the steps and nodded at me. He asked if this was related to Kayla Lewis. I said probably yes, and that I'd explain once we secured the kid. Jeremy told his crew to gear up for confined space entry and sent someone back to the truck for detection equipment. I asked if I could go down with them. Jeremy looked at me for a beat, then asked if I had training. I said no, but I knew the case, and the child and I might be able to help if we found him. Jeremy said absolutely not. This was a rescue operation, not a consultation. I told him the kid didn't talk and communicated through tapping and drawings, and he'd called me 20 minutes ago using a phone I couldn't trace. Jeremy's expression shifted slightly. He asked what the kid said. I said he confirmed he was safe, confirmed he wasn't hurt, and confirmed Kayla Lewis was dead. Declan's posture changed. He asked if I was sure about that last part. I said 1 tap for no, 2 taps for yes, and Mario tapped once when I asked if Kayla was alive. Declan pulled out his radio and requested a detective and the medical examiner on standby. Jeremy told his crew to prep for recovery in addition to rescue. A woman in full turnout gear approached. 5'7", athletic build, dark brown hair braided tight under her helmet, brown eyes, high cheekbones. Jeremy introduced her as Catherine Bridges and said she'd be first in with detection and light. He told her I'd be coming down after her if conditions allowed. Catherine gave me a look that said she didn't love civilians in her workspace but wasn't going to argue with her lieutenant. She asked if I had a flashlight. I pulled out my phone. She handed me a spare torch from her belt instead and told me to stay within arm's reach of her at all times. And if she said move, I moved. I followed Catherine and Jeremy around the side of the building to the exterior basement access. Peyton had unlocked it from inside. The door stood open, and the smell rolled out even before we started down the concrete steps. Kerosene, burned sugar, something else underneath I still couldn't name. Catherine pulled on her helmet and flicked on her headlamp. She tested the air with a handheld meter that beeped twice, then settled into a steady green light. She said oxygen was acceptable and no explosive gases detected, but the chemical smell was real and we'd be keeping it short. We went down. The basement opened into the same laundry room I'd searched an hour ago. Washer, dryer, concrete floor, open drain in the center with the cover still off where I'd pried it. Catherine crouched next to it and shone her light down. The beam disappeared into the pipe for about 6 feet, then hit open space. She called up to Jeremy that it looked like the drain pipe dropped into a service corridor or subsurface tunnel. Jeremy asked if it was stable. Catherine said she couldn't tell from here. Jeremy told her to proceed with caution, and he'd be right behind her. Catherine lowered herself into the drain feet first. It was tight, but she was lean, and her gear compressed enough to fit. She dropped about 8 feet, and I heard her boots hit concrete below. Her voice came back up, slightly muffled, saying the corridor was approximately 4 feet wide, 7 feet tall, concrete construction, and extended in both directions. She said she was proceeding east toward the neighboring property. Jeremy went next. I waited at the edge and watched his light disappear. Then Catherine called up and told me to come down slow and use the pipe edges for grip. I sat on the floor, swung my legs into the drain, and pushed off. My shoulders barely fit. I scraped my jacket on the way down and landed harder than I wanted to, stumbling forward into Jeremy's back. He steadied me without comment. Catherine was already 15 feet ahead, her light sweeping the walls. I followed with Jeremy between us. The corridor smelled worse down here, thick, sweet, burned. The concrete was old, cracked in places, with water stains running vertical along the seams. My light caught something on the wall to my left and I stopped. Moths. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, pressed flat against the concrete like someone had pinned them there. Gray wings, pale yellow markings, too many legs. They didn't move when the light hit them. They looked dried out, papery, stuck in place with something I couldn't identify. I reached out and touched one. It crumbled into dust under my finger. Catherine called back, asking if I was keeping up. I said yes and kept moving. 30 feet in, the corridor widened slightly and the smell changed. Less kerosene, more organic. Burned meat. I knew that smell. I'd smelled it once before, at a car fire during my school counseling days when a student's uncle had crashed on the highway. I didn't want to smell it here. Catherine stopped ahead and raised one hand. Jeremy and I stopped behind her. She said she had a body. Kayla Lewis lay face down 10 feet ahead, arms behind her back, wrists bound with white cord that looked like laundry line. Her skin was blistered, blackened along her shoulders and neck. Her hair was burned short on one side. The concrete around her was scorched in a wide, uneven circle, darker toward the center. The smell was unbearable. Jeremy stepped forward and crouched next to her. He checked for a pulse at her neck, even though it was obvious she was gone. He called it over the radio. Time of discovery, condition, probable homicide. Declan's voice came back saying he was notifying the detectives and securing the scene upstairs. I stood there staring at her and felt something tighten in my chest that I recognized from before. Simone's locker, the district review. The careful language everyone used to explain why the system had worked correctly, even though a kid was dead. I'd fought Annie for phone records and subpoena access, and she'd shut me down because this was supposed to be a licensing review, not a criminal investigation. I'd accepted that. I'd filed it away as bureaucratic obstruction and kept working with what I had. And now Kayla Lewis was dead on scorched concrete with her wrists tied, and I was standing over her body, realizing I'd been too slow, too compliant, too willing to work within the system. Catherine's voice pulled me back. She said the corridor continued another 20 feet and ended at a metal door. Jeremy told her to proceed. I followed. The door was industrial, heavy, painted gray about 100 years ago. It stood half open. Beyond it was another basement, different layout, same vintage concrete. Catherine stepped through first and swept her light across the space. Furnace in the corner, water heater, stack of old paint cans, camping stove on the floor near the center of the room. Mario sat cross-legged behind the stove. 4'8", slight build, sandy blonde hair, pale blue eyes, oversized hoodie. He didn't look up when we entered. The library book lay open on the floor in front of him, pages facing us. I couldn't see the illustration from where I stood, but I saw Mario's hand resting on the edge of the page like he was holding it open. Catherine told him to stay still and keep his hands visible. Mario didn't move. Jeremy stepped through the doorway behind me and immediately told Catherine to hold position. He'd seen something I hadn't. I followed his gaze and saw the line of liquid running from the camping stove toward the corridor entrance where we stood. Clear, strong, chemical smell. Rubbing alcohol, maybe something stronger. Mario lifted his other hand and tapped twice on the metal casing of the stove. Tap, tap. Then he pointed at me. Jeremy said nobody was going anywhere alone. Mario tapped again, harder, tap, tap, tap. He pulled a small lighter from his hoodie pocket and held it up where we could see it. I said I'd go. Jeremy grabbed my shoulder and said, absolutely not. I told him Mario wasn't going to hurt me. He just wanted to explain something, and if we rushed him, he'd light it. Jeremy asked how I knew that. I said I didn't, but the welt on my palm was itching again, and I had a feeling. Catherine asked what welt. I showed her my right hand. The red mark in the center of my palm had darkened since this morning. Raised and angry looking, shaped like something with a small round mouth, had pressed into the skin. Jeremy looked at it, looked at Mario, looked at the alcohol line on the floor. He spoke into his radio and told someone outside to bring the foam unit to the neighboring building's basement access immediately. Then he told me to step back slowly and let the professionals handle it. I nodded. I took one step back. Mario flicked the lighter. The foam hit before the flame even reached the alcohol. White chemical spray from behind us, pressurized, loud as a gunshot in the enclosed space. It knocked the lighter out of Mario's hand and drenched the floor in 2 seconds flat. Mario fell backward, startled, arms up. The book flipped on its own, pages turning fast, like wind was catching them even though there was no wind. Moths poured out. Not flew. Poured. Like ash, like paper scraps, gray and yellow and weightless, spilling from between the pages onto the wet concrete where they stuck and dissolved into nothing. Catherine moved fast. She had Mario's wrists secured before he could recover his balance. Jeremy called for Declan. 2 officers came through the corridor door and helped Catherine bring Mario to his feet. He didn't resist. He didn't look at any of us. He stared at the book on the floor, pages still open, now empty. I stepped closer and looked at the illustration. A bee, same one from the cover, lowering a paper lantern into a dark hole. The lantern's light was fading in the drawing, barely visible, almost gone. Declan came through and confirmed Kayla's body in the corridor. The medical examiner was en route. He asked Jeremy if the basements were clear. Jeremy said yes and ordered both locations sealed pending investigation. They led Mario out through the neighboring building's exterior access. I followed last, climbing concrete steps into cold air that felt sharp and clean after the smell below. Mario sat in the back of a patrol car with his hands cuffed in front of him, staring straight ahead. An officer stood by the door. Declan told me I'd need to give a full statement. I said I would. I wrote the report that night at the motel. It took me 4 hours. I included everything: the missing staff member, the sealed drain, the manipulated fire alarms, the library book's checkout trail, the tapping phone call, the scorched patch by Herring Run Park, Kayla's body in the service corridor, Mario's setup in the adjacent basement. I didn't speculate. I didn't try to explain the moths or the book flipping on its own or why Mario had burned Kayla Lewis after she'd tried to help him. I wrote what I'd seen and what I could prove, and I submitted it to Annie Murray at 6:42 the next morning. She called me at 9:15. She said the report was thorough, but needed reframing. She said the department couldn't present a narrative involving metaphysical elements or unexplained phenomena to the licensing board. She said I'd done good work identifying the staff negligence and supervision failures that led to the incident, and she'd be routing the report into internal review with emphasis on policy improvements and training gaps. I said Kayla Lewis was murdered. Annie said yes, and that was a criminal matter now, not a licensing matter. And our job was to document the institutional failures that created the conditions for the incident. I said Mario Maldonado killed her. Annie said Mario was a child in state custody with documented trauma and complex needs, and the juvenile system would handle his case according to appropriate protocols. I didn't argue. I'd argued before, and it hadn't mattered. Mario disappeared into the juvenile system within 48 hours. I never saw him again. Kayla became a line in a database, a case number, a training example for future staff about supervision requirements and documentation standards. The book went into evidence, and I never got it back. The group home closed 3 weeks later for unrelated code violations. The welt on my palm didn't heal. It faded slightly, went from angry red to pale pink, but the raised skin stayed. I felt it every time I closed my hand, every time I signed a report, every time I shook someone's hand during an interview. It itched worst at night. I started keeping my hand closed during meetings, fingers curled inward so nobody would ask about it. It's still there now, small, round, permanent. I don't explain it when people notice.